and welcome to episode 6 of the Liberated Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Steve Cuss of the Game Plan Consultancy. Now, on the Liberated Leadership Podcast, we find leaders who I think have a really interesting take on leadership, and we talk about their leadership journey, and then we get into the Liberated Leadership model and we see how my thinking aligns with their thinking. Now, today I have something a little bit different for you on the show. Today I'm really pleased to welcome Jon Adler to the Liberated Leadership Podcast. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Now, Jon and I met when I read your book, Golf Psychology, and I started to compare it to the principles in my book, Liberated Leadership. And I started to realise that how you think about golf psychology and how I think about coaching leaders and how you think about coaching players, they were born in some of the same principles, I thought, and we'll get into that in the pod. But where I'd like to start is, you call the book Golf Psychology, don't you? But you don't call yourself a golf psychologist, do you? So
no.
Could you just talk about exactly what it is that you do with golfers?
So my job is to help golfers to play to their potential when it matters. So I work in the field of golf psychology, but I'm not a golf psychologist. I didn't train in psychology at all. But what I have done is explore my own mind for myself. So I did lots of different courses, but the main one that I did was 10 days of silent meditation. And within that 10 days, then I started to experience for myself the reality of the mind and how it likes to interfere with what we do. And while I was doing this exploration of the mind, I started to play more golf and put the applied the principles to my golf game, and noticed that there were some interesting performance developments within that. So I've been back quite a few times for more periods of silence to deepen my understanding of the mind. So I'm a performance coach working with mainly golfers. I do other sports people too, but yeah.
And where did you do the silent retreats?
In Hereford.
Right.
Yeah, I was looking all over the world. I went to India, into the ashrams, and I went to Thailand, to the Buddhist temples, and I was a seeker looking for some sort of spiritual enlightenment, because I knew that there was a part to play, concentration and focus. I realized that was a big part of golf. I was introduced to some of the principles of the inner game of golf. I did a course with Timothy Galway and Sir John Whitmore, and that was sort of transformational. How I could think less and play better, which was counterintuitive to me at the time, but actually bore out to be, quite true.
One of the stories that really resonated with me here in the book, and I was actually listening to you narrate it actually in the audio book, and you tell the story of the caged bird.
Yeah.
And just to paraphrase the story for the listeners and viewers, it's the story of a bird that's caged and yearns for freedom, looks out the window at other birds swooping through the air, and mourns its lot stuck in the cage, until one day the door to the cage is left open, but the bird can't fly away. And this resonated hugely with me, because it's about liberation, and sometimes we can be scared of liberation.
Yes.
We yearn for it.
Yeah.
We can be scared for it. And that story seemed to really speak to me about my own journey and what I try to help leaders with that journey to some extent. What was it? What is the cage for golfers? What are some of the misconceptions, do you think, that keep them trapped?
That's a good question.
About how they can perform.
Yeah, what is the cage for golfers? Well, I think the biggest, people like to say, well, this is just what I do. This is how I do it. Even if it doesn't work, it's safe and it's familiar. I think that's the cage for all of us, isn't it? This isn't working for me. I wish things were different, but I'm going to just stay here and put up with my lot, instead of embracing change, because I think change is frightening. The unknown is frightening. Better to have whatever I've got and know that it's awful than risk losing even that and explore and find something else. So I think the caged bird is thinking about leaving all night until the following morning the owner comes and closes the cage door and it's too late.
Yeah.
So golf-wise, there's all sorts of traps, aren't there?
There are.
There's two. What I say, there's two games being played when we play golf. There's the outer game, and the obstacles there are the golf course and the slopes in the greens and the water. But there's an inner game being played all the time, and this inner game often gets overlooked and ignored. And mastering the inner game is what my job is, I suppose, helping people, pointing people towards that.
Yeah, so I'm so interested in that. The phrase that was coming up in my mind there was back to Shakespeare. I think most truths can be found in Shakespeare somewhere. In the famous To Be or Not to Be soliloquy, there's the line, we would rather bear the ills we have than flee to others we know not of.
Okay.
And so that's the familiarity of the known, even if we kind of know it's not serving us. So what's the process then of even opening up to that inner game that you described for golfers? Do people even get the distinction from the get-go?
I think people have to reach a point where the suffering becomes unbearable, and then a change may happen, and then they're open to change, and that's pretty much what happens when clients come to me. They think about it, and they think about it, and they think about it, and at some point they just go, okay, I've got to do something now, and they reach out, and then we start, and then I almost have to get to that point. Until they get to that point, they're still hanging on to the old ways. And then they'd get in touch, and we'd have some honest conversations about why they play and what their intentions are when they play and what they're trying to control, usually trying to control the score and the outcome. Yeah. And as we know in golf, that's pretty pointless because golf seems to decide when you're going to get a good result or not. What we can control are the things that, we are in control of. So our attitude, our mindset, how we deal with the mistakes. So if you expect a bit more suffering and not frightened of the suffering, then you're in a much better place to deal with whatever comes at you in golf, I think.
Yeah.
Is that the same in business?
Yeah, it really is. I think what you're saying there that resonates with me so strongly is this issue of control. Because I think a lot of people in business leadership, they feel the pressure intensely. They feel to deliver results for themselves, for their family, but often for the people they lead as well. And what that creates is a lot of anxiety or maybe even fear for people when they're in leadership positions that often, and I've got to say this is more common in men than it is in women, there's a struggle to speak about it. There's the idea that this strongman model, I think, still persists, and I should be strong and never vulnerable, because vulnerable means weak for men, and men should never be weak. We tend to believe. But in that fear and anxiety often creates a response, often an unconscious response, I think, of, I'll take greater control. I'll grip tighter onto this business. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what they should be doing. And I lived that myself, for a while. And that was of trying to make sure, as a production leader on video games, that everybody on the whole team knew exactly what to achieve next and how to achieve it. Ultimately, that led me to burnout, and because it's impossible. You can't control it. And my realization, my road to Damascus moment, if you like, was I've got this all wrong. I've got this completely back to front. I shouldn't be trying to control people. I should be trying to create the environment where people know what to do, rather than me or any other leader telling people what to do. So it's about giving up control and trusting the wisdom of the team, or the wisdom of the talented people on the team, that they will find a way and that they will know what to do. If I can align on what we want to achieve, they will actually know what to do. And as I was reading your writing, or rather listening to you talk through your writing, I kind of felt like the analogy fits really strongly with this idea that I needed to trust the team. With, I think what you're saying, you can clarify for me, is about trusting our body, trusting our swing, without the mind trying to control it. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair analogy.
Yeah.
If usually when we want something and the craving becomes strong, certainly in golf, then we think we have to be perfect and we try and control everything. And there's lots of evidence. Neuroscientists have done lots of tests that prove that this sort of top-down instruction, the mind telling the body what to do, fires all the wrong parts of the brain. And so performance drops, but the mind thinks that it should be controlling everything. And all you really want to do is give the mind something simple to focus on, so that, as you say, you can trust your body and it can do the best it can do with the skill set it has. I mean, you're not going to be able to think your way to play at Augusta.
Yeah.
But you'll certainly be able to access more of your skill if you keep the mind focused and calm as much as possible when you're on the golf course, because your emotions will be there, and that's okay. But certainly, over control and over emphasis on the outcome leads to poor performance, because you're not taking care of the things that you can control.
Yeah.
You're spending all your energy trying to control something that's out of your control.
This since we had a couple of lessons working together, and since I've read the book, when I'm putting, one of the thoughts I've been trying to put into my mind is, I can't control what happens there. That is where the hole is. That's the thing I want. I want the ball to go in the hole. I can't control that. I can control what happens here. I can start the ball. After that, it may go in, it may not. That's a very different mindset to, I want to hit the ball into the hole. And that really resonates with, to me, the difference between I can control an alignment on what I want to achieve with people I work with, but I can't control what they do once they leave this conversation. I might think I can, but I'd be better off aligning with just the thing I can control, which is what I achieve. And the analogy for me is I only control this bit. But you might say I control even less than that. What would you say?
Well, I think you're certainly participating in this bit.
Well, that's true.
But if you're trying to control that bit mentally, trying to control your body there, again, you're still controlling.
Right. Yeah.
So you can observe it, though. I can be present to it. I can be witness to what my body's doing, which is a subtle difference, but it's part of the difference that makes a difference, in my opinion. So there'll be I can feel my golf club swinging. I can feel the putter moving back and forth, and I'm aware of it. I'm not necessarily trying to make sure I take it back just perfectly and swing it through just the right amount. Now I'm controlling again, you see. Now it's, look at the target, give my body all the information it needs in order to react, and then give your mind a job to observe non-judgmentally. I can observe the path that my body chooses. I can observe the tempo. I can observe something, because when you observe, you're not trying. You can't get observation wrong. It's just dealing with reality.
Right.
When I'm trying to be good and trying to control, there's a bit of tension there already.
Yeah.
Like I said, I don't know if I mentioned it in the past. Trying presupposes doubt. If I ask you to my birthday party and you say to me, I'm definitely going to be there, John, well, I've got no doubt there. But if you say, John, I'll try and make it, I'm thinking, he's not coming, So best not to try. Just do and observe non-judgmentally. It's a subtle little difference.
Yeah, I love that. So this is then, it's more about set a clear intention. There's a clear intention for the ball to go in the hole. And put the right variables into the computer.
Yeah.
And then get out of the way.
Yes.
With the mind.
Yeah. Step back and watch and observe. But full attention. Full attention as an observer.
And that, I think, is a beautiful analogy for leadership, is the way I see it, is set clear intention with your team, align on what it is you want them to achieve, different to what you want them to do, and make sure they understand something of the vision that we're going to long term, make sure they understand the constraints in which we're working, some boundaries, and then get out of the way until that team needs you again. So yeah, that really matches for me. The tricky bit, of course, is how do we get that mind? Because the mind doesn't want to really do that, does it? In my experience, the mind is very keen to get involved.
Always looking to get involved and control. It's just by the same principles, really, is set the intention and then observe and check in with yourself. Regular. Am I doing what I set out to do? And if I've gone off the path a little bit, no problem. Just start again. Come back, start again. Yeah. It's a bit very similar to the meditation retreats. Every time you lose your attention, you pick a point. I mean, before I went on this first meditation retreat, I'd never meditated before in my life. I didn't go to learn to meditate. I went because part of the information on the course was you can learn to develop deeper levels of concentration. That was what I was interested in. But yes, if you pay attention and you lose your focus on what you're paying attention to, once you've realized it, you just come back and start again. No problem. That's nobody sits there in a Buddha-like state with not one thought in their mind. That's not the trick. It's almost like a rep. You notice you've gone, you come back, you start again, and you spend some time, but it doesn't take long before the mind takes you off. So checking in with yourself regularly, I would say.
Yeah, that really resonates. And I was having a conversation with a friend earlier this week, actually, and he was saying, I'm rubbish at meditating. I said, well, why? What happened? He said, I start with my focus on the breath, then it keeps drifting off. I was like, no, that's not being
Me too.
You can't be rubbish at it. It's noticing that it's drifted.
Yeah.
And I love that rep analogy as well. That's just like lifting the weight, isn't it? Every time we do that, we hope that we're practicing the neural pathway such that we notice when we're not meditating that our mind's producing a thought that maybe we're not so keen to engage with, or it isn't healthy or productive for us to engage with as well.
Yeah. I think it's good for... The problem with meditation is there's no instant payoff. That's true. These days, everyone's looking for the instant payoff, instant reward. I want to feel it now, but there's enough evidence to suggest that, if you practice it regularly, even though if you're not necessarily feeling it, you don't come home from the gym after one session and think, my muscles have got huge. It's a cumulative effect. Similarly with meditation, it's just mindfulness, whatever you want to call it. You don't have to sit cross-legged, or there's nothing too hippie-ish about it. It's just directing your attention and being aware of when it goes away. And it's very useful for golf in as much as you're sort of practicing the ability to let go of sticky thoughts, I call them, unwanted trains of thought. So you've hit a bad shot, and now you're angry that you've hit a bad shot, and now you start analysing why you've hit the bad shot in an angry state of mind, making conclusions that are far from true, but going along with those, and now you're down a completely different path. Realising you've started that process and being able to let go and come back to the present moment and just say, now's not the time to fix and change. Just, bring yourself back to the moment, accept your mistake and move on. That's a much better way, in my opinion anyway, to perform on the golf course.
That's really interesting in so many ways. So now's not the time to fix and change is a really powerful thought when we think about leading teams as well. When the team's in the midst of performance, maybe what it needs is encouragement, recognition, and maybe a course correction. We're slightly off course here. Here's some feedback on how performance is landing. But the time to fix and change needs to be outside the arena of performance. So I think if I understand correctly, you're not saying there isn't a place for developing the skill.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
But when you're in the midst of performance or trying to deliver your peak performance, is not the moment for that.
No, and certainly it's not the moments just after a mistake are dangerous for you to start analysing, because you're not quite with it. No harm in, as you're walking down the fairway, once you've composed yourself again, questioning yourself and say, what was I thinking? How was I feeling? Never mind the technique, which everybody seems to go to technique. My swing broke down. Did I break down before the swing broke down? That's so what was I thinking? How was I feeling? What was the context of that shot? Did I need to get it close to the pin in my mind? Was I craving a little bit more? Was I worried about the water at the back of the green or to the right? So what's the context? No harm in reviewing and asking yourself those sorts of questions as you play. But as opposed to fixing swing mechanics too deeply, I would say you don't want to get too involved in that. You can certainly feel a different swing the next time you stand up and let your body direct it.
Yeah.
But too much in-depth analysis, I think, when you're playing. What's your experience?
Yeah, so what I'm getting there is this, that there's a clear distinction between training skill and accessing skill. And I think that both are necessary, but we probably, in leadership, overemphasize training skill for ourselves and thinking about our team. Well, I'll improve the process the team is using. I'll make a change to the product or service that we're making, and that's how we'll perform better. We'll get the better results that we want. And those things are valid for sure. They're a key part of a business. It's more about what's the balance between that and working on ourselves and coaching and developing the people around us, which I would say is more about accessing performance in the moment. How do we create an environment for our people to do their very best work and create that space where they can perform, whilst acknowledging that there's another space where we will train skill for them as well. And both are really, really important. And it's...
I just had a thought there while you were speaking, Steve. Sorry to interrupt. Creating that environment that you can perform to your best, certainly with elite golfers, and in fact with all golfers. One of the things, I've been coaching golfers for 20 years. One of the simple things that I do, which seems to have the most profound effect very often, is having people be kind to themselves and accept their mistakes, instead of being really hard on themselves and berating themselves and what I call it, sort of boiling their own kettle, is to stop that. Because they never deliberately, did you ever go on a golf course and deliberately make a mistake? No, we're always doing our best, even if our best isn't always great. So if you're always doing your best, then there's no point in being hard on yourself. But I think that's something that people get in the habit of.
Yes.
And it makes a big difference if you feel that, it's okay if I make a mistake today. It just frees you up. Not necessarily to say that you deliberately want to make mistakes, but it's not the end of the world if I do. I can relax and swing and play, and I'll deal with my mistakes, as opposed to being so concerned about mistakes that you get tight.
Yeah. So when I'm coaching leaders and when I'm playing golf with people on the course, I notice a common thread that really resonates with what you're saying there. So when you're playing golf with someone and they hit a shot they don't like, the way people out loud are prepared to talk to themselves is phenomenally harsh. what the hell was that, you fool?
Yes.
That was
That's a polite version.
Yeah, I am being polite. So it's all coming out. Equally, when I'm coaching leaders, I often find that self-compassion is really hard. And this, interestingly, comes often from leaders who are incredibly compassionate to other people, but somehow can't find it for themselves. Is that something you have to help golfers with, that self-talk?
Yeah, I mean, being aware of the self-talk. I don't want them to be necessarily overly positive, but I certainly don't want them to be negative. You wouldn't speak to your friend if you were caddying for a friend. You wouldn't speak to them like that when they made a mistake, because they just turn around and say, "Listen, I'm not playing with you again." But we do it to ourselves and we justify it. We say, "Oh, well, it's just me. It's just what I do. It doesn't mean much." Golf is a game of such fine margins that, the differences that make the difference often get overlooked. And I think creating the environment, which is what you said about to allow for better performance, well, that's got to be is the sort of the mindset that mistakes are fine, they're part of learning, and it's okay if you make them. It's not the mistake, it's how I deal with it and how I respond to it.
Yeah. How hard is it for golfers to take that on board in your experience?
Depends how much suffering they've had and how willing they are then to open up. What I'll do is very often I'll just have them pay attention to the level of self-misery that they're giving themselves. Simply that. Just go out, and if you're really hard on yourself on a hole, at the end of that hole, write a 10 down. And if you're really kind to yourself and you forgive your mistakes, just write a 1 or a 0. So we'll set a scale. You'd be surprised that just by paying attention, there's no great theories or methods behind it. Just simply pay attention with the intention of being kinder to yourself. And if you're the first few holes you're really mad and angry and the scores are high, no problem. Just write it down. Over the course of a couple of rounds, things just settle down, because your awareness of the problem, shining the light of awareness on it, changes things. Is that your experience too?
Yeah, if you can, self-awareness is the start of everything. If to put it into business management terms, we would say, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. That would be a common way of talking about business.
Yeah.
And so if we want to manage ourselves, I would actually say if we want to lead ourselves, we have to have some measurement. So I love a simple, I can imagine someone doing that through their workday, actually, just last hour then, 0 to 10. Where were you? Yeah. How compassionate were you to yourself? That would be really interesting. And on that self-awareness, we have the opportunity to make a more skillful decision. It doesn't guarantee that we will, of course, but at least we're creating the opportunity for that. And it leads me to thinking about another subject. Well, actually, let me just say one more thing on that before we move on. Because a phrase that's been coming up for me recently is never waste your suffering. The idea of that there's something to learn when we suffer as well. And I think naturally when we have a suffering experience, it's unpleasant. So let's push that away and move on from it as quickly as possible. Whereas that phrase seems to offer that there must be something to learn in that. There must be something that suffering's trying to lead us to. Is that consistent with what you're saying about suffering when we're playing?
Yes, and just in life as well, I think. Suffering, we've all probably had some difficult moments in life and where things feel really harsh and life seems hard. But from those moments, you sort of grow, I think, and the shell that you sort of build around yourself that life's always going to be great and wonderful, it gets cracked, and then when it's cracked, a different you appears afterwards. And I think how you relate to your suffering and how you relate to what's going on in life directly affects your experience of it. So in golf, you might as well expect suffering, because did you ever play golf and not have some moments where you just go, oh, this game, occasionally you have a wonderful round where everything slots into place, but they're few and far between. But yes, I think certainly you can learn a lot more from your defeats and your losses very often than the wins. The wins, often it's, and you did a certain amount of things right, great, but I think a lot of people have said that over the years, that losses are to be learned from, and there's plenty. If you're aware enough and open enough to say, okay, ask the right questions of yourself. What did I, where was I? What was I thinking? What was going on? What can I learn?
Yeah, I was talking with a group yesterday actually about authenticity and the idea of being a bit playful with your sense of self and a sort of rapid prototyping of yourself as well. And that's exactly the right inquiry. What did I learn then? What have I found out about myself from that performance? Which is a nice segue, I think, into another question I wanted to ask you, which is about feedback. What is good feedback on the golf course? Let me give you a little bit of context of where I'm going with this as well. So one of the things I've observed in coaching leaders, I'm not 100% sure why this happens, but it seems to be that the more senior people get in organisations, the less frequent and less in-depth the feedback they receive. I talk about feedback being a response to a signal. The signal being our behaviour, our performance at work, and the feedback being the response to that. And if we get no response to the signal we're putting out, we can't learn. So it is different to direction, it's different to teaching, but someone has to give us that feedback because it lands subjectively. Otherwise you'll just make things up, you'll just pick random things out of your environment. Oh, that seems to go well, that didn't.
Yes.
I'm wondering if that is a direct analogy to golf, and what do we, before players work with you, what feedback are they taking, and how do you try to shift mindset on that?
Yeah. Well, I think before they see me, the only thing they're really concerned about is the final score on the card. So there's very little feedback. There's no learning. Timothy Galway, I remember, they had like the triangle: performance, enjoyment, and learning. And if those three things, if the triangle was an equilateral triangle, then you had imbalance: performance, enjoyment, and learning were the same. But very often it would be a very tall, skinny triangle with performance as the main goal, where there was no enjoyment and no learning. And getting golfers to change their mindset so that they can place more emphasis on learning and enjoyment. And then the feedback would be, well, if that was your intention for the round, what did you do about it? What actions did you take? And what's the feedback? Did I enjoy it more? Was I able to let go a bit more? What did I learn? What was the intention for me to learn? I think there's a definite place for feedback. That's part of my role, is to provide accountability and listen to their feedback and give them my ideas over the years, over the experience I've had of listening to people, maybe adjusting some of the ways they're looking at things and evaluating things, and say, have you thought about the possibility of a different way of looking at things and evaluating what's happened to you?
Yeah, that's really, really powerful, actually, I think, and I think applies directly to how we learn about leaders and actually how we create a learning environment. I think a culture or an organisation that has a genuine learning environment is the one that's most likely to succeed, that embraces failure in its widest sense, or things not working out how you want. Failure tends to be a negative word, and saying, right, this is a learning opportunity, and we'll learn quickly, is likely to be the company that innovates effectively and ultimately succeeds with its products and services in one way.
I played golf a week ago. I haven't played much at all lately, and you ever have those games sometimes where it feels like you've never picked up a golf club? like you've never played the game. Other times you play so nicely you think, I might even turn pro. I feel that good. And the opposite's also true. And I had this round, and so I was honest with myself and said, well, let's evaluate what went on. Well, I don't practice anymore. I hardly ever play. I go out expecting the game to be there. You either accept it as it is or do something about it. So I went and saw a friend of mine. I've had very few golf lessons in my life, simply because before I had the time and the interest, so I'd find my own way. I was interested in self-discovery and working it out. I have less time to do that these days. So I went and saw somebody and got somebody to look at me and give me their opinion and a different set of eyes, which I think is always useful. Stepping outside of yourself and asking someone with a certain amount of skill and knowledge to say, what's your take? Yeah. I'm open to it. I need something to focus on. What do you see? And it was great. And it's something I continue to do. I think I should have done it probably a bit more. Yeah. I was so interested in discovering for myself what I could do. And it's done me okay. I got down to single figure golfer, so it's worked okay. But another pair of eyes on the thing is a good idea.
The trained skill is still an important thing.
Oh, yeah.
I read Rory saying recently something which I've heard in other contexts as well, of when I'm playing well, I can't imagine playing badly ever again. And when I'm playing badly, I can't imagine playing well ever again.
It is.
And we can get into that in business as well, I think. How are we ever going to get out of this slump? We've had a few misses. Yeah. How do we, in business sector, we're never going to get to it again. And
the other side as well, then? The things are going so well, you take your eye off the ball.
Yeah, and you can be, so we can sort of maybe stop learning without that being a conscious decision. Because look how successful we're being, or maybe making a mistake of making a mismatch between did what we did lead to the success? Yeah. Or was there a role of luck? As well? We not looked at that. We made a false connection between cause and effect. So those things really matter. One more subject I wanted to ask you about before we talk about the work we're doing together at the moment. Trust is big in golf swing and in business. Trusting our people, trusting our swing. We talked about that being really important. What are some of the techniques you use to help golfers develop trust in themselves and in their swing?
Well, I guess understanding that trust involves risk. Just because you trust something doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to all be fine. There is a risk involved in trust. I used to trust my son when he was younger. I used to have a packet of biscuits and they'd be out and I'd come home and they'd all be gone. And my wife would say, oh, Callum's eaten them all again. And she said, we've got to hide them away, and so he can't find them. I said, well, no, I want him to learn that he can have some, but not all of them. So I trusted him and said, listen, Callum, if you want a biscuit, have a couple of biscuits, but leave some for everybody else, And he learned, and the trust developed. Still occasionally I'd come home and all the biscuits were gone. There'd just be some crumbs. So you have to put your faith in something and hope it carries on through. With regards to on the golf course, you have to trust what you have, the skill set you have. And the best way for you to do that, I think, is to, as I say, be aware of your mind looking to over control and direct the body, which doesn't help. And give it something to do, something useful, something that's related to the task, and something to observe without judgment. And trust that you have enough skill to execute whatever it is you're about to do. And if you don't have enough skill, then go away and learn it and develop it. You can't trust what's not there. Yeah. But I think it's setting an intention to, a strong determination. Whatever happens today, I'm not going to start trying to fix my swing. And that's a big one for me with people who overthink and just set an intention for 18 holes. I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to stick to this one simple focus over the ball, and I'm going to accept my mistakes and just see how that feels for 18 holes. See what you can learn from that experience. My guess would be you'd find a little bit more peace and enjoyment just straight away. Whether performance comes immediately, well, don't worry about that. Stop looking for performance. Start thinking about, as I said, enjoyment and learning, and then see if performance follows. It usually does.
Yeah, I love that. Charles Feltman said that trust is making something important to you vulnerable to the actions of others.
Yeah.
You made your biscuits vulnerable to the actions of Callum. But also then if we take that into the swing, it is vulnerable, isn't it? It's like we have to accept that we're not going to get the outcome we want often in golf, but also in business and in life. And so it's important to me. I wouldn't be playing if I didn't try to do my best, but I may not do my best. I may not access my skill and talent. So I have to be accepting of that, but still not going to control it. Like you say, take the mind away.
Well, the opposite of trust. Yeah, sorry. The opposite of trust would be doubt, right?
Right.
And swinging with doubt is a wrecker. You know, if there's doubt in your mind about what's going on, it's very difficult to focus and concentrate clearly. So better off to be, you know, trusting with what you have than to start letting your mind run the show and be full of doubt and mistrust.
I don't know many teams that perform their best if they know their leaders doubt them. And maybe that's an analogy with not many swings perform their best when they know their owners doubt them in that sense.
I think not knowing's okay. This space of, I don't know where this ball's going to go, which is true.
Yeah.
But people struggle with that. They think they have to control it and know exactly what's going to happen. Well, you don't know. It hasn't happened yet. So, like I said, you know, the certainty of uncertainty, allowing for, well, I don't know quite what's going to happen, but it's okay. Whatever happens, I'll be fine. Now, I'll allow my body to go ahead and do what it can do. I'll give my mind something to focus on, something simple, something sensory, so something in your feels, or and playing that way usually brings good results.
Love that. So if people want to know more, they can get Golf Psychology, presumably from All Good.
Yes, on Amazon and what have you. And the audiobook is on Amazon too.
And how can people find you online?
Online, golfisamindgame.com is the website, and there's all sorts of different things. Your podcast will be up there. I've got a few other podcasts with other people on there, and there's lots of interesting articles and things that people can learn from, and they can contact me via the website for coaching sessions, either by telephone or face-to-face.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve. Enjoyed it.
That's it for this episode of Liberated Leadership. John and I are also putting together a program. So if you've been intrigued by some of the things you've heard today, and you want to improve your leadership and improve your golf by thinking about where your intention is going, maybe working on something like that self-compassion, freeing yourself from whatever your cage is as a leader, then look out for the Clutch Performance Program that's coming from John and myself, some principles from Liberated Leadership, some principles from Golf Psychology, and I'll drop some links down below to that as well. But for now, if you've enjoyed this, please do drop us a like and subscribe. And we'll see you soon for the next episode of the Liberated Leadership Podcast.